Reaching high places can be challenging, but whether you find yourself hanging siding on a construction site, changing light bulbs in a warehouse, or performing outdoor utility work, aerial lifts can help you reach areas that would otherwise be impossible to get to. OSHA defines an aerial lift as any vehicle-mounted device, telescoping or articulating, or both, which is used to position personnel. They are mobile and can usually be set up and operated by one person. This program will introduce you to the various types of aerial lifts, the standards that affect them, and the hazards that are associated with them. When it comes to workplace safety, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, is the federal agency that writes the regulations and enforces compliance in the U.S. But if you use an aerial lift, there is another group that you should be familiar with. It's the American National Standards Institute, also known as ANSI. Unlike OSHA, ANSI is not a government agency. It's an association that establishes safe work practices for different industries, called American National Standards. In 2020, ANSI made some revisions to their standard for mobile work platforms, beginning with how they refer to the equipment, changing from aerial work platforms, or AWPs, to mobile elevating work platforms, MUPs. But there were a number of more significant changes as well, affecting the equipment's design standards, job site safety procedures, and training requirements. First, ANSI reorganized how they look at MUPs, dividing them into two groups. Group A, equipment that moves vertically but only within its tipping lines, the wheels or outriggers, and Group B, equipment that can move vertically beyond its tipping lines, such as a boom lift. Because of the variety of aerial lifts that are available nowadays, there are lifts that fall into both groups. The standard's job site safety requirements focus on three things, all of which apply to aerial lifts: creating a safe use program for aerial lifts wherever they are used, doing a risk assessment for each job an aerial lift is used on, and structuring a rescue plan for each type of aerial lift that is used on a job site. The standard's training requirement now includes giving occupants as well as operators training about the safe use and rescue operations of an aerial lift that they are using. The changes to the ANSI design standards for aerial lifts were significant as well. First, all new aerial lifts must have a gated entrance to their platform. Chains are no longer allowed to be used as entrance guards. Also, the minimum height for platform railings was increased from 39 to 43.5 inches. Next, ANSI addressed where aerial lifts are used. New aerial lifts that are used outdoors on rough terrain must have foam-filled or solid tires. Additionally, manufacturers can produce aerial lifts that are only to be used indoors and are certified as such. Lastly, all new aerial lifts are required to have alarms and safety devices, such as a safety load limit alarm, as well as a sensor that will stop the lift if the limit is exceeded, and a wind speed sensor on any aerial lift that is designed to be used outdoors that will direct operators to reduce their load capacity in windy conditions. While all of these design standards will be incorporated into newly manufactured lifts, older models do not need to be retrofitted to these standards. In addition to the changes in aerial lifts design criteria, the ANSI standard also requires companies that use aerial lifts to create a safe use program for all of their lift equipment. This program must have three major components: performing a risk assessment for all work sites where aerial lifts will be used and the tasks that they will perform there, creating a rescue plan in case workers encounter problems when using a lift, and training for both operators and occupants of aerial lifts. Conducting a risk assessment is pretty straightforward. Employers must ensure that all job sites are inspected, potential hazards are identified, control measures and safe work procedures are developed to address the hazards. and the resulting safety plan is communicated to all employees who could be affected by the use of aerial lifts on the job site. This includes not only the site supervisors, lift operators, and the occupants who perform tasks while they are raised on an aerial lift platform, but also other workers who may not be directly involved with the lift equipment but could still be affected by its presence. Risk assessment also plays an important role in the second ANSI Safe Use Program requirement, rescue planning. How aerial lifts operate and the locations where they are used can create unique challenges if the workers on a lift get into trouble and need to be rescued. Whether they have fallen from a platform and are hanging from their lifeline in midair, the platform has become entangled, leaving them stranded off the ground, or the lift has failed in some way, plans should be made ahead of time regarding how to assist the workers quickly and safely. What's more, ANSI requires that all rescue plans be written down and included in a company's employee training manual. The third leg of a safe use program is employee training. Before employees can be authorized to operate an aerial lift or work on a lift's platform, their employer must first verify that they are both physically and mentally capable of doing so. Aerial lifts come in a number of shapes and sizes. So depending on the work that you're doing, there are usually one or more different types you can use. Extensible boom platforms use a single arm to lift their work platform to the desired height. Aerial ladders consist of a single or multiple section extendable ladder, such as the powered ladders on fire trucks. Articulating boom platforms contain two or more hinged boom sections, which allow the arm to maneuver into difficult-to-reach places. Vertical towers are designed to elevate a platform straight into the air using a mechanism such as a telescoping mast. Most aerial lifts are made up of four major components: a base with supports for the lift's platform or bucket, a lifting mechanism, the platform or bucket itself, and controls, which are often located on both the base and the platform. Another main difference between various types of aerial lifts lies in the method that is used to lift the platform: hydraulics, pneumatics, or electricity. OSHA requires that anyone who works with or near aerial lifts be trained on both how to operate a lift as well as the various hazards that can be involved when using a lift. Hazards can include fall and falling object situations, as well as equipment tip-overs and even electrocution. To help you reduce or eliminate hazards like these, aerial lift training covers how to perform a safety inspection on an aerial lift, how to drive it safely indoors and out, how to recognize and avoid unsafe conditions in the areas where you'll be using a lift, how to avoid exceeding a lift's maximum load capacity, and how to raise and lower a lift platform correctly. Details on how to use an aerial lift safely are also discussed in the operator's manual that is provided by its manufacturer. In addition to your initial aerial lift training, you could also be required to undergo retraining if hazards are discovered in your workplace that affect how lifts should be operated, or you need to use a type of aerial lift that you haven't been trained on. Retraining will also be required for anyone who has an accident while operating a lift or is seen using the equipment in an unsafe or improper way. In many cases, the operator of an aerial lift will also be the only person on the platform, called an occupant. But when other employees will be occupants, ANSI requires an operator to make sure that they also have a basic knowledge of the safe work practices that are required before beginning to work on the lift. Occupants not only need to understand how their activity on the platform can affect the stability of the equipment, they should also have a general knowledge of the purpose and function of the aerial lift's controls as well as the lowering and shutdown procedures. The operator must also inform occupants about the hazards that are associated with the worksite and the tasks that they will be performing, as well as how to avoid the hazards. And at least one platform occupant besides the operator should be trained to use the aerial lift's controls in an emergency, in case the operator is unable to. However, occupants are not authorized to operate the controls of an aerial lift in other than an emergency situation. Another thing that both operators and occupants need to be trained on is the different types of fall protection that can be used to avoid or mitigate any potential fall hazards. They need to know that guardrails should always be in the proper position and undamaged, that all access gates should be closed and latched, and that any other openings must be guarded before the platform is raised. In some cases, operators and occupants will need to wear personal fall restraint or fall arrest devices, and will need to be trained on its use as well. One of the primary hazards related to working with aerial lifts is falling from the platform or bucket. So when you work on a lift, you must use an appropriate fall protection system. This typically consists of an anchorage, a connecting device such as a lanyard, and a harness. You should always inspect this equipment before using it. Make sure that there are no cuts, frayed edges, or other damage. If you do find any damage, the equipment must be removed from service and replaced. Another serious hazard that is associated with aerial lifts is tipping. This can occur if a lift is overloaded or isn't properly stabilized. To minimize the possibility of a tip over, you should never exceed the load limit of the lift you're working with. Proper placement of the lift will also help in avoiding a tip over. If your lift is equipped with outriggers, use them, and make sure that they're set up on stable ground. Falling objects can be a hazard when you're using an aerial lift as well. Even if you're careful, tools or materials can sometimes leave the platform and head earthward. Protect people who are working around the lift by marking off the area with safety cones or warning tape. Your surroundings can also be hazardous when you're operating an aerial lift. Overhead hazards can be especially troublesome. If you're working indoors, you need to be aware of beams, rafters, and ceiling heights. Keep your eye out for HVAC ducts, piping, and cable raceways as well. If you're outdoors, you want to pay attention to trees, light poles, and power lines. Aerial lifts can help you reach places that you would never be able to get to without them. But they can be dangerous if you don't know how to use and work around them properly. Let's review. Aerial lifts are covered in the ANSI Mobile Elevating Work Platform Standard. The standard focuses on three things: creating a safe use program, performing a risk assessment, and structuring a rescue plan. Job sites where aerial lifts are used must be inspected to identify potential hazards. There are a number of types of aerial lifts, including extensible boom platforms, aerial ladders, articulating boom platforms, and vertical towers. You must be trained on all of the types of aerial lifts that you work with. The three main hazards associated with working with aerial lifts are falling from the platform, the lift tipping over, and objects falling from the lift. If you have to work up in the air, an aerial lift can be a big help, and with the right training, you can always end up safely back on the ground at the end of the day. Reaching high places can be challenging, but whether you find yourself hanging siding on a construction site, changing light bulbs in a warehouse, or performing outdoor utility work, aerial lifts can help you reach areas that would otherwise be impossible to get to. OSHA defines an aerial lift as any vehicle-mounted device, telescoping or articulating, or both, which is used to position personnel. They are mobile and can usually be set up and operated by one person. This program will discuss how to prepare to work with an aerial lift, operating a lift, and working on the ground around an aerial lift safely. Before you use an aerial lift, you want to verify that it's in good working order. You also need to make sure that there aren't any problems with the area where you'll be setting up. So you will need to conduct two different inspections, an equipment inspection and a worksite inspection. You should inspect your lift prior to the start of every work shift. This will ensure that nothing's happened to it while you've been away, and that it's still in good working condition. You'll find a list of things to look for in your lift's operator's manual. It's been compiled by the equipment manufacturer and should be followed rigorously. But there are a number of things that should be looked at on every lift. Always check that fluids are at their proper levels. Wheels and tires are not damaged and are properly inflated. And the battery and charger are functioning as they should. Confirm that the controls operate correctly and that the horn, gauges, lights, and alarms all work properly. Test the steering and brakes as well. Be sure to include all of the lift's components in your inspection, especially the power system, guardrails, and other safety devices. Never use a lift if any of its components are defective. Remove it from service until a qualified person has made repairs. It's also important to inspect the area where you'll be using an aerial lift. You'll need to survey the work zone, take note of any hazards that exist, and take action to reduce or eliminate them before operating the lift. If you're working outside, look for drop-offs, holes, or other potentially unstable surfaces, slopes, ditches, or bumps, and overhead power lines. You also need to be aware of any high wind, rain, or other potentially hazardous weather conditions that are on the horizon. If you're working inside, look for low beams, rafters, or ceilings, overhead hazards such as HVAC ducts, pipes, and electrical conduit or cable raceways, driving obstructions such as other equipment or storage racks, and materials or debris on the floor. Performing these inspections on your lift and your work area are essential and will help you to avoid dangerous situations. Once you have ensured that your aerial lift will operate correctly and the area where you'll be working is safe, it's time to set up your lift. First, position the lift where you want it. If it has outriggers or other stabilizers are available, position them on a level, solid surface. If you're outdoors, you may need to lay down pads or move some earth to get a proper base. Make sure the platform's guardrails are secure and that the access gates are latched shut. Look through the operator's manual for instructions and tips on using the lift. Review the signs and notices that are posted on the lift itself, including any warnings, cautions, and restrictions, as well as the rated workload and maximum platform height. Calculate the total weight that the lift will be carrying. Make sure that it doesn't exceed the lift's rated capacity. Be sure to take into account your own weight, plus the weight of any tools, equipment, or other people that you'll have with you. When you are finished preparing the lift itself, you should set up work zone warnings, such as cones, tape, or signs, to let others know that you're working in the area and restrict access. If workers must be on the ground while you're using the lift, make sure they are wearing hard hats. Finally, inspect your personal fall protection equipment. If you find any damage, take it out of service and replace it. When putting it on, make sure the harness fits snugly. If you have any questions about what fall protection you should wear or how to rig it, ask your supervisor. Once you've determined that your lift is stable and everything is set up correctly, you're ready to go to work. Climb into the platform or bucket, then close and lock any gates or doors. Next, attach your fall protection to the manufacturer's approved anchor point on the lift. Do not attach it to an adjacent structure. This could result in you being pulled off the platform if the lift moves. Remember to stand securely with both feet flat on the platform's floor. Don't lean on the guardrail or gate, and never sit or climb on the rails. Test the controls to make sure the lift operates smoothly and will maneuver correctly. Some aerial lifts have safety features built in, such as a dead man switch that halts the machine if the operator is injured or incapacitated. Make sure that these are functioning as well. Slowly raise yourself to the desired height and location. Never try to use ladders, planks, stools, or other devices on the lift to extend your reach or to bridge gaps between the lift and the area where you want to work. Be sure not to exceed the manufacturer's limits for the vertical and horizontal extension of the lift. This information can be found in the operator's manual or on warning stickers affixed to the lift. Never override hydraulic, mechanical, electrical, or pneumatic safety devices. These are there to help ensure that the machines are operated safely. Watch out for overhead hazards as you elevate. If you're outside, high-voltage power lines can be extremely dangerous. They have their own set of avoidance rules based on the amount of electricity that they're carrying. If possible, the line should be de-energized. If that's not possible, it's mandatory that you keep a safe distance away from them. OSHA says that if you're not a qualified electrical worker, you and any conductive objects that you're holding should be at least 10 feet away from a line carrying 50,000 volts. You must stay even further away from higher voltage lines. Sometimes you may find that you need to reposition a lift to get better access to the location you're trying to reach. But you should never move a lift while its platform is raised unless the equipment is specifically designed to do this safely. If a lift cannot position its platform where you need it, consider using another type of lift or even a ladder or scaffold to reach your destination. Remember that unless there is an emergency situation, lower-level control should not be operated while the lift is raised unless the worker on the platform specifically grants permission at that time. Avoid reckless driving or horseplay when you're moving. Even though they're large, lifts can be easily damaged and expensive to repair. Obey the posted speed limit at all times. If there is no posted limit, maintain a slow, steady speed. And always give pedestrians the right of way. There may also be times when you need to get off of a lift to get your work done. If you have to transfer from a lift to an adjacent structure, the platform must be resting on the structure or positioned within 1 foot of it. Your fall protection system should be equipped with 2 lanyards. One of them should be secured to the platform. The second lanyard should be attached to an appropriate anchorage on the structure. Once you have secured the second lanyard, you can then detach the platform lanyard and transfer yourself onto the structure. You get back onto the platform by reversing the process. Once the work you're performing on the platform is complete, there are a number of procedures you need to follow to lower a lift safely. First, make sure the area below is clear of tools, materials, and people, so the platform won't hit anything on the way down. You may want to enlist the aid of a spotter to help. If you choose to use a spotter, be sure to work out the verbal instructions or hand signals that you'll be using to communicate ahead of time. Bring the lift down slowly and carefully until it is fully lowered. Secure the platform or bucket to the supports to prevent it from moving during transport. If you have used them, return and stow any outriggers or other stabilizers that are on the lift. Remove any warning signs, caution tape, or safety cones from the work area. Stow reusable items in their proper location. Once everything is secure, you can return the lift to its designated storage area. Remember to proceed slowly and follow safe driving rules as you go. Look out for other traffic that may be in the area and sound the horn at all corners and intersections. Even if you don't operate an aerial lift, having one working nearby can expose you to a number of hazards. These can include falling objects, equipment tip-overs, and even electrocution. So be aware of aerial lift equipment when it's working in your area. Watch for safety cones or warning tape that lift operators have set up to mark off hazard areas as well. Stay a safe distance away from the lift whenever possible. It's especially important to stay clear of lifts when their platforms are being raised or lowered. You also need to use caution when lifts are entering or exiting your work area. A lift on the move will normally give pedestrians the right of way, but you shouldn't assume that the operator can see you. The higher up they are, the more difficult it is. So stay out of the driver's blind spots and make sure that they know where you are. If you have to go into an area around a lift, always wear appropriate personal protective equipment, including a hard hat and safety shoes with steel toes. Aerial lifts can help you reach places that you would never be able to get to without them, but they can be dangerous if you don't know how to use or work around them properly. Let's review. You should inspect any aerial lift that you will be working on before you use it. When preparing an aerial lift for use, make sure it is on firm, level ground and it can take the weight of the people and equipment that will be on it. When you're operating an aerial lift, make sure all of the safety features are set up correctly and you are aware of the types of hazards that you could encounter. When you're finished using an aerial lift, you need to stow the equipment and materials you've been working with, as well as the lift itself, properly. If you're working on the ground around an aerial lift, wear the appropriate PPE and make sure you know where the lift is at all times. When your work requires you to go above and beyond, aerial lifts can make your job a lot easier. And by knowing how to properly set up and operate the lifts that you use, you can go home safe at the end of every day.